M.2 SSDs are getting cheap and cheap M.2 SSDs are getting good, but it can be intimidating to buy an M.2 SSD just because of the installation process. Fear not, in this video, I'm going to teach you how to install an M.2 SSD in your computer the easy way. Before you buy an M.2 SSD, make sure to consult the motherboard's manual to make sure that you're buying a compatible SSD. Once you've decided on which SSD you want and it's arrived to your house, take it out of the packaging and make sure to keep note of any heat sinks or other accessories that it might come with. The PCIe SSD that I'm showing here is the XPG SX8200 Pro. This is a PCIe 3.0 SSD that's using 4 lanes and has read speeds of up to 3500 megabytes per second sequential and write speeds of up to 3000 megabytes per second sequential. To install an M.2 SSD, the only thing you'll need is a Phillips head screwdriver, and you can get them for as little as $5 at any dollar store or on Amazon. I'll have one linked in the description below. You might also want to have a bowl handy to keep all of the screws from going all over the place when you take them out. Okay, with that done, let's open up the computer case and see what's inside. My motherboard has one M.2 slot, and that slot is underneath the topmost PCIe 16X slot. So I'll have to take out my GPU to get to it. This is one of the places where you'll need the Phillips head screwdriver, as the GPU is attached using Phillips screws. You may be concerned with static destroying your PC components when you go inside. One suggestion I will have for that is that you keep your power supply plugged into the wall with your power supply in the off position, and that will ground your computer case, thus preventing static electricity discharge from your PC. Another way that you could address this issue is by periodically touching the computer case when you are working, so that the discharge happens into the metal case of the computer and not on any sensitive components. Make sure to keep any screws that you had to take off to move your GPU or any other components that you might have to move to install your M.2 SSD in a bowl close by, so that it's not all over the place and that you don't lose them. These screws are fairly small and kind of hard to find when they drop to the floor. As you can see, the slot is on one side. It's a flat, narrow slot with a notch on one side, and in front of it, there's a couple of screw holes with numbers in front. This will tell you the length of the M.2 slot card that your motherboard will actually accept. For example, my M.2 SSD is a 2280 slot. This means that the SSD, when it's plugged in, extends from the actual plug to the third screw hole right here. As you can see, there's a half circle on one side of the M.2 SSD and a notched PCIe connector on the other side of the SSD. So you want to match the notch side to the plug, and the semicircle will go to the point where the screw will come off. Your motherboard should have a screw inside one of the screw holes for the M.2 connector, so you want to take that off before you install your M.2 SSD. You may not have to do this step, but if you have a heatsink that came with your M.2 SSD, make sure to attach it to the M.2 SSD now before you install it. Make sure that your M.2 SSD is parallel to the SSD plug, and then you can plug it in. You'll notice that your SSD sits at an angle, and that is expected because now you have to press down the SSD and screw it into the correct screw hole so that it sits snug in your motherboard and does not have any connection issues moving forward. You'll want to screw this in fairly tightly, but not too tight, because you don't want to destroy any of the PCB components on the M.2 SSD or the motherboard. It should be a fairly snug fit, so make sure that it's tightly in there. There should not be any looseness to the connection. Now that that's installed, I can plug my GPU back in. Before putting any of the screws back on the GPU, I would recommend that you turn on the computer and test out that your SSD is visible in your BIOS. Now that you've installed your M.2 SSD, first of all, congratulations, but you'll notice that once you boot into Windows, you can't actually see your M.2 SSD in your My Computer, and that's expected because you have to allocate the drive space using disk management. So use Windows Search to look up disk management. You will be able to scroll through a list of hard drives that are connected to your computer. They are color coded, so the blue ones means that they are mounted and formatted correctly for Windows to take a look at them, and the black one means that you need to mount this drive. For me, that's disk 5. That's where my M.2 SSD is installed. So I want to right click and select New Simple Volume. And here, for most part, I'm just going to hit next and keep default settings on because this SSD is not going to be taken out of this PC and used in a Mac, so I don't have to change any of the settings to make it work. So once this process is done, you'll be able to see your new M.2 SSD in your My Computer and be able to use it. At this point, you probably want to run a speed test on your M.2 SSD to make sure that it's operating at the speeds that it was advertised at. I recommend downloading Crystal DiskMark for this performance benchmark. And then you want to run all of the benchmark on the correct drive that you have. For me, that's drive H. And once you're done running the benchmark, the top row read and write speeds are going to be the sequential read and write speeds that you are advertised to on the product itself. That's everything for this tutorial. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like. If you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.